ongoing virtual town hall series. My name is Jasmine Delafosse, and I'm the senior regional organizer with the Gathering for Justice. For those of you who do not know, the Gathering for Justice was founded by the legendary Mr. Harry Belafonte in 2005 after he saw a story on the news about a young 5-year-old Black girl in Florida being handcuffed in a kindergarten class for throwing a tantrum. And after realizing that children of color were being brutalized from all across the United States by police across the nation, despite the work of the civil rights movement, Mr. Belafonte brought together elders of the civil rights movement from all across the U.S. to form a covenant to end youth and child incarceration and to dismantle the systemic racism in our justice system. The Gathering's 15th anniversary season started at the end of August with 15 days of programming, and we have had a really robust agenda for the next year. And so we hope that you would do us a favor and follow us at NY Justice League on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, as well as Gather #4 Justice for you to sign up for our mailing list and to stay informed about the Gathering for Justice. And we thank you for tuning in. And now I'm really honored to begin to introduce introduce our first guest, who will be talking about a reason why we're here today. Today, we're going to be talking about a We Keep Us Safe series, which has been a series that has been focusing on what it means for us to keep our families safe in our communities. I'm going to begin to introduce you to Ashley and Michelle Monterosa, who are sisters of Sean and Justice League members. And I'm really excited to hear from you about sharing us about who your brother was and what he meant to you all, and getting to understand his case a little bit more.
Well, thank you, Jasmine, for introducing us, and thank you to everyone tuning in to hear our story and hear our story for our brother as we fight to get him justice. I'm Michelle Monterosa. I am Sean Monterosa's oldest sister.
And I'm Sean Monterosa's baby sister, Ashley Monterosa.
Sean was the middle child, and growing up, he's always been more so the protector in the family. Even though I'm the oldest sibling, we always argued and butted heads because he always wanted to be the older sibling of the family. However, Sean was an active community member here in San Francisco from the early ages of 12. Our parents immigrated to this country to provide us a better life. And, from an early age, my dad would always say, Sean, you're going to be the next man of the household. And Sean took that into literal sense. And from the early ages of 12, he found any way to find work. Sean started selling hot dogs at the age of 12 outside of bars here in San Francisco. So just being a minor out there and, finding work, that's when his first encounterments with the police came. But from that age, he started bouncing around local nonprofits here in San Francisco.
Sean was part of MyEP, 7 Teepees, Horizons, DJ Project, and so many other organizations. And then he graduated from high school and he went on to job train in Menlo Park, where he graduated as valedictorian from his carpentry 6-month program. And for me personally, I'm the baby sister. Unfortunately, I had to turn 20 the day after my brother was murdered. But my dad was always working. And so for me, it's the reality of immigrant families. Your parents always have to work multiple jobs 7 times a week and you barely see them. And so my brother, at a really young age, he stepped up and began to become my father figure. And so, it pains me that I don't really have my protector or my father figure here anymore. But Michelle and I will continue to fight for our brother and get the justice we've been begging for at this point.
And another thing with our brother, a lot of viewers and a lot of people hear of these stories, they only see the aftermath of what happens when there's a police officer involved shooting, and that results into an innocent man or woman's life being gone. And prior to that, Sean always found ways to knowledge himself up. He was an avid reader.
There was a semester in high school when he was going to high school with me where he read 50 books in a semester in the class. And even my teacher and his teacher at the time was so surprised because she knew a lot of educators that don't even read that much books. But Sean was so thirsty to knowledge up and so thirsty for maturing more in literature and literally. And Sean was book smart, and he was so smart and was ahead of his time, really. And it's tragic that his life was cut short.
And for us, we love our brother no matter what, and he instilled so many values and morals that our parents have as well. And we could be crying, we could be mourn, we cry and mourn as we go, but we've made this commitment to make this fight and just continue to bring awareness to our brother's case, but also bringing change that's long overdue here in California and the whole world, as we see police brutality at an all-time high. And I believe that the time is now for change, and we're going to do everything in our power to bring justice to Sean and bring justice to so many others that are not here, and for the many voiceless. And just want to say thank you.
Well, we're so honored to have you all here, and we thank you for sharing his life. And like you said, oftentimes people like to paint a picture out there of who people are, but you all lived with him, you all knew him, you all grew up with him, you all spent birthdays and holidays and every single second with one another, and that his life mattered. And before all of this, that he did matter, and he mattered to so many people around you all. I know that on June 2nd, 2020, your lives all changed in a matter of a message or that got to you all, where you all were sent off on a wild goose chase to locate your brother in the incident. Can you all just share with the audience who may not have heard about your brother's case or who your brother was? Can you just share with us about what took place that night, and what happened to your brother?
Well, that day on June 2nd, my brother at 11:40.
No, it was June 1st.
June 1st. So at 11:49, my brother had sent a text message to both Ashley and I saying, "Can you guys help me by signing this petition to get George Floyd justice?" So he sent us the change.org petition that was going around. A petition takes less than a minute to sign. So I responded by saying, "Just did it." And Ashley responded with a heart so he can know that we both did it. We thought nothing of it, went to bed, just we'll see Sean, we'll hear from him later on. We got a phone call around 1:09 a.m. as we were already in bed, and we got a call, and this girl was hysterically crying, saying, "Sean is dead, Sean is dead, Sean is dead." Before anything, I never like to jump to conclusions. I want to make sure we know what's going on. I said, "Are you sure what's going on?" We all shared locations with each other just for emergencies like this. And when I pulled up my phone, we saw that Sean's pin location was located at 1050 Redwood Street. So we were already shelter in place, but it
was locked down. So most cities in the Bay Area or just California had like a mandatory curfew at 8 o'clock. And so the phone call was at 1:09 already on June 2nd. What's it called? The order to stay home was still in order. And Michelle and I said, you know what, we're going to get dressed. We're going to go and we're going to go find Sean or whatever's going on. And our parents were really frustrated with us. And we're like, you can't leave. You're going to get in trouble. And we're like, I don't care. That's our brother. We have to go figure it out. And we have to go find him.
And we're from San Francisco. And we're born and raised in San Francisco. It took my brother being out in Vallejo one night to be murdered on the hands of police one night. So we had no idea of what had happened. So we arrived to the location first. We go to Kaiser. This hospital, they said they're on lockdown because there was an officer involved shooting. I had asked the officer if he knew anything that had happened. He said no. I would recommend you go to the crime scene and ask if they have any questions for you. When we got to the crime scene, there it was 1050 Redwood Street where my brother's location was located. We asked one officer if he can tell us what's going on. We're not from here. We're just here to locate our brother. And if they had any answers for us, he said, nope, I can't answer anything. While another officer comes from behind with his little notebook and says, what's your brother's name? And I said, Sean Monterrosa. And he said, you can go down to the police station and they'll give you answers there. So I hop in my car. I drive up to the Vallejo police station. They knew that all their officers were out on the streets, that there was no one in the office there to help us out. So when we drove by, the lights were completely shut off. The door was locked. So then again, I'm like, all right, is there another hospital around here?
So we go to Sutter in Vallejo, and we speak with the security trying to figure out if Sean was located there. And the security there stressed that it was a facility for cancer patients, but he was listening to the police scanner all night, and that it's a crazy night. And he said, "Well, if your brother's location's still over there, and you're over here looking for him, you can only put one and two together and just pray for the best."
Yeah, and he just really stressed the fact that we shouldn't be out here. It's been a crazy night. And like Ashley said, that he really told us to start praying and just be prepared for whatever we're gonna. Basically, I think he knew just from even saying that, he had been hearing the dispatch calls all night. And, it was they said it was one of the craziest nights that Vallejo has ever had. That's why they had National Guard deploy the next day. So after we were at that hospital, I went back to the crime scene again, but we ended up coming from a different location to just see if we would get different answers. I approached another officer. He says, "I'm not of high ranking. Go walk to those other officers. They can probably help you out." So I walk over and we arrive to these two officers. And as they're there, one has an AR-15 in his hand, and he goes ahead and puts it on the dashboard of the car. And I asked the officer, I'm like, "We've been here since 2 a.m. We're trying to locate my brother." I go with the picture of Sean while Ashley goes with her phone with the pinpoint location saying Sean's phone is right there. The officer said he can't disclose anything. Ashley starts to say, "Well, my brother has a black phone, black case." And the officer said, "Well, I don't know. There's probably a lot of phones over there." So he said, "Hold up. I'm going to go ask the detectives back there if they can give me any answers." But as he was walking away, he realized this officer had an AR-15 on his hood of his car, told him to put it away in the car, as if me and Ashley are going to really grab his AR-15 and do something with it. So that was already the start of it. And he goes over there. Me and Ashley are just trying to ask him questions like, "If we can't find our brother, what can we do? Do you know?" Like, he said, "I'm sorry, I'm not from here. He's from another county over." Then they came to help. So the officer who went to talk to a detective over there walks back and says, "Well, I'm sorry, I can't locate your brother's phone. There's a lot of phones here. You're just going to have to wait. If your brother may have been arrested, you can go ahead and check the cell inmate locator, your brother, since he said he was arrested. So you're going to have to wait till 10 a.m. And something just didn't feel right still. So we got in our car. I drove to the Kaiser again, and I told the first officer that told me to do this whole wild goose chase what had happened, the answer I have doubted. And he said, "There's nothing I can do here for you. It's pretty late. You guys should, just wait till tomorrow." So we go in our car, and I realized, let's just call 911 at this point.
So we tried calling the non-emergency line, and the non-emergency line was down. So we were like, whatever, we're just going to call 911. We call 911, we express the situation, and the lady just transfers us to the watch commander. And whoever the watch commander was on duty that night answered the phone very aggressively and was upset that we had gotten contact of his phone number.
He said, he started saying, "Who gave you this number? Why do you have my number? Why are you calling me?" I said, "Well, an officer gave it to us. They told us to just ask you." So we started telling him what had happened. He said, "What's your brother's name?" Very aggressively. I said, "My brother's name is Sean Monterosa." He waited a little bit and said, "Well, you're just going to have to find out on the news like everyone else tomorrow." So we don't even know what had happened with Sean yet. We didn't know there was an officer involved shooting. For all we know, Sean could have been arrested. And it's one of those things where being arrested is even almost like an okay for families, right? That you would much rather have your loved one be arrested rather than being murdered by the hands of police. So
after that phone call, Michelle and I just looked at each other and we're like, you know what? We're not getting any answers here. Let's just go home and regroup, and we'll wake up. We'll come out here early and see if we can get any answers from Kaiser or the police station. And by that time, it was like 5:30 in the morning. So we drive back home to San Francisco, and that's like a 40-minute drive.
And we didn't sleep that long. We woke up at 9 a.m. and we went on the news, and we found an article that said officer involved shooting, one dead, one dead and one arrested. And we didn't know anything. And we are just calling, asking the hospital if they can give us answers. They said they couldn't answer anything. And we took it upon ourselves. We kept praying at home with my mom and dad. My mom was at work, but my dad was at home with us. So we just started to pray and just saying, "God, give us an answer. What's going on with Sean? We're worried." And it's about 1 p.m. already when
I decided to call the coroner's office of Solano County, and I call the office. The lady at the reception um, takes my information, and I give a description of my brother, and she asked for his birth date. So I disclosed 4/24/1998, and then that's when we got confirmation that my brother was there. And we were on the Bay Bridge on our way to go to the coroner's office. We thought we could probably go identify his body had he indeed been there. And then the lady said it was pointless to not even go.
But
So we got off on Treasure Island exit and went back to San Francisco.
But she had also stated how she was very confused to why no sheriff or no one from Vallejo Police Department had reached out to our family. Usually they're used to, I guess, as a coroner's officer, used to someone reaching out. So she took our information down, and this was about in the afternoon. And we go home, and thankfully, I have a really close friend of mine who connected us with our attorney, John Burris, and she had gave us a call saying, "Don't worry, this is horrible, but there's someone on it already. Just give him a call when you can. Disclose what had happened all night for you guys." And here we are rushing through emotions, and I finally got on the phone called John, and I disclosed what had happened, everything that night, and he said, "Okay, well, tomorrow you're gonna come to our office. We're gonna sign some paperwork and see what happened to your brother."
And the next day was when Chief Shawnee Williams gave his public statement to the news. And it wasn't until June 3rd, which was unfortunately my 20th birthday, that Detective Kevin Rose of the Vallejo Police Department reached out to try to get a statement from us. So it was already maybe like 48 hours or 38 hours that a police station or a police officer had tried to reach out, but not even to explain the situation or what had even happened.
They didn't disclose. All they said, "Can I just talk to the family, Monterosa?" He said, "I need everyone around." I said, "I'm sorry, unfortunately no one's around. If you want to give us a call, we're going to be home together around 6 p.m. We had already agreed with John we would meet him later in the afternoon. And no matter what, I don't trust the police. So I knew like whatever was going to be said from him, I wanted to have John around us. So he said, "Okay, well, I might not answer. So leave me a voicemail." I said, "Okay." So I hung up, and as I'm calling family, telling them what had happened to Sean, Sean, we didn't know the story behind, but just saying, my brother's no longer here with us. He calls me back 10 minutes after and says, "Oh, actually, Michelle, since I have you on the phone, I'm just going to talk to you." I didn't feel comfortable, obviously, talking to him. So I said, "I'm sorry, I have my grandmother on the other line." I hung up, and I instantly called John, and I said, "This detective named Kevin Rose keeps calling me, and I don't want to talk to him." And John said, "As you shouldn't. Just give me his number, and my office will handle it." That afternoon is when John and John went out there to see what indeed the chief of Vallejo Police Department was going to say had happened that evening, and we had no idea. So by the time we got to John's office, is when he disclosed to us that
Sean was on his knees, and midway lifting his hands up was when he was murdered.
And we had no footage. We didn't know how, but that my brother was killed instantly, and it's one of those things where to this day, I remember when John told us, "I'm going to need you guys to be ready, prepared to get on camera and talk about your brother." And we
were like, "We can't get ready for another week." And he was like, "No, you have to jump on this now because they're going to try to push their own narrative." And,
ever since then, it's been nonstop for us. And we will do anything in our power to make sure that, we hold the Vallejo Police Department accountable.
But that we're also the last family that Vallejo murders their loved one. Vallejo has been murdering 37 men since 1997, and they're yet to see any change in their community.
And it hurts, I miss my brother. It's the 4th month since Friday, and
it's hard.
It's hard, and we're healing as we're going and doing this work. And in reality, it hasn't really been a day for us to
grieve or mourn. Every day we're organizing, we're strategizing, we're back in school. We're not in school full time because we're kind of juggling this, but it's hard, and we're trying to heal too. But doing what we're doing is what's honestly helping us heal. And I know that's not really a way to heal, but putting our energy and our time into this is what's really helping us and continuing to motivate us to push through.
And it hurts to know that my brother will never be back. But for us, in order to make us cope with this pain, is how many more lives can we save? what can we do to implement that this never happens to another family, that we're the last family in Vallejo, that there is no officer bouncing around departments and counties murdering unarmed civilians. Even if you're armed, just these officers shouldn't have a license to kill. And we will do anything in our power. And I'm committed to this fight and journey for my brother, but for so many others as well. And it's hard. It's definitely hard.
Well, I appreciate both of you all, and just want to acknowledge that you all have been grinding and fighting extremely hard and putting your bodies even on the line for your brother.
Yeah.
And I want to say that I see you all and that we love you, and that when we talk about what it means to stand up for one another, it means that people all across who's watching must come in. You all been talking about Mr. Burris. I want to bring him in. Mr. Burris, you are not new to this. You have clearly been working on civil rights litigation and discrimination cases, police misconduct cases for such a while. You've been on the ground and been fighting on many cases, particularly around Ronnie King and Oscar Grant and Tupac Shakur. And you've been doing this and standing in solidarity with so many families, including even our family in Stockton, and have been representing many families really across this country, and really setting a tone of what it means to fight for a family. I just want to appreciate you for being on here, and also just wanted to bring you in. Like, what about Sean's case, made you want to take on this case? Tell us about the moment of the story of what happened with this unmarked vehicle shooting through the window and all the things that had taken place. If you can just share and give us some background of what actually took place that evening.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to participate in the Gathering for Justice. I love the name. I love the title. I love what you stand for, because it is an issue of fighting for justice, gathering information, and fighting for justice, like many, many families around the country and in the area. And of course, Michelle and Ashley have been at the forefront since this happened to their brother. This is a fight for justice. For me, what happened when I first heard about this, I thought it was odd, but then on the other hand, when I talked with the sisters, I got a good sense that this appeared to be a great family. I mean, that was pretty obvious. And then I wanted to know more about Sean. Who was this kid and how did he get killed here? Such a young person. Seeing the sisters first, and I need to figure out, okay, who was this kid and how did this happen to him, and what kind of location was he in? But what I did do, which threw me completely to the case, was I went to the press conference that the chief was having early. I think within a day or two, having met the sisters, I went to a press conference with the chief, and I was shocked when the chief said that Sean was running. He stopped, went to his knees after in a surrendering position, and he's in the process of pulling up his arms over his head when he was shot. And that to me was horrible, because that means you shot a person who was trying to surrender. And that to me is clearly unconscionable. That's a violation of civil rights. It's clearly murder. If a person is surrendering, I just finished a case, the Tyndall family in San Francisco, in Oakland, where Tyndall was in fact trying to surrender, and he gets shot 3 times in the back, and we had a jury award. We tried the case. So I was kind of already into this notion that if a person is trying to surrender, you don't get to kill them. They're supposed to surrender. And the police did not allow him to do that. So then we get into I'm already outraged by that. I tell the sisters about it. More work, we then find out, over a period of time, that the shooter, the person who actually did the shooting, was a person who had been involved in 3 other shootings more recently in Vallejo, that he had shot 3 additional people, and he had not been disciplined, he had not been terminated. But the egregious nature of this case is that he was in the back seat of a truck, of a pickup, and he shot Sean through the window, the windshield window, the front window, as he's in the back seat with the AK-15. Sean is in front. And the question is, how did you even see him? What could you see him do? Now, he claims that I think he claims at one point, I think he had a gun. He pointed a gun at us. Another time he asked a person, he said, did you see what he did? Looks to me like he had a gun. The truth of the matter, there was no gun. There was nothing in his hands. He did have a hammer that was on the inside of his sweatshirt or his shirt that you could not see. And so what you really have is a person who was trying to put his hands up, and during the process, he's shot and killed. The chief makes that statement. So when he makes that statement, it's like, this is outrageous. You shot and killed this young man. This is flat out murder. A man is trying to surrender. So that causes us obviously to be outraged by it, and certainly caused me to say, look, this cannot stand. There's no way we can allow this to happen, to stand. And so we then get actively involved. I go out to the scene. I take my investigators. We take pictures, kind of walk our way through what could have happened or should have happened. The part that was most disturbing is that I don't believe this officer saw anything. He just saw a young guy running toward him, who drops down. He interpreted that as maybe a threatening move, and he shot and killed him. But Sean did not do anything. He didn't have a weapon that was pointed. It's pretty clear that no one says that Sean extended his arm as if he had a weapon of some kind to shoot, because he didn't, or that he reached in his pocket and tried to pull something out. However, what happened after this is that after the chief makes this statement, within a week later, the union, which is important in the city of Vallejo because they're a very powerful entity there, the police union makes a public statement that contradicts what the chief had to say. What the union says is that Sean was running, he crouches down, he stops, crouches down, and puts his hand inside of his waist as if he was about to shoot, grab something to shoot. Well, no one else sees that. That's not described by anyone. And so we wanted to know when the hell that statement comes from. And so we haven't found out yet, other than the fact that the union, we believe, surmised and created a scenario that they think would be justifiable. Because the most important aspect is all of these men, all of these officers had cameras. None of the cameras were turned on at the time of the shooting taking place. So you have the cameras on before, and you have it when the shooting is taking place, and we have the cameras on after the shooting taking place, but nothing at the time when Sean was in the location he was in, the position he was in, and the officer shot. To me, that's unconscionable. That's a fabrication. It seems to me it's a destruction of evidence, and it's one of the parts of the case that we're dealing with. Because the very item that could have demonstrated clearly what Sean was doing, that evidence was destroyed or was not there. They claimed that the camera didn't see it. Well, that's hard to believe, particularly when you had 4 or 5 different cameras that were there and everybody could see those cameras. So very, very disturbing. So from that, we filed a lawsuit, basically setting forth our view that Sean was killed in violation of his civil rights, that there was excessive force that was being used, his Fourth Amendment rights. We also filed on behalf of the mother and father that their Fourth Amendment rights, that is the loss of their familial relationship, was destroyed. Likewise, I filed on behalf of the sisters because they were a family, and so their 14th Amendment rights were also destroyed because they had a close-knit family. As you can hear, a very close-knit family. This is one for all and all for one. That's what you get from this family. So we wanted to protect that particular unit, and we filed a lawsuit on behalf of that. We filed a lawsuit both alleging both federal violations and state violations. Pretty typical for us, in terms of what is there. What this case has become more unusual, of course, is because the union filed a lawsuit basically saying that the name of the police officer could not be released to the public, and the court granted that. So the police did not ever respond to our request for the name of the officers because they were trying to protect the officer. Now they want to protect him because the officer has been involved in 3 other different shootings. He had shot several different people, and they claimed that his body was that he was in threat. And that may or may not be true. But we got the name of the officer from another source, and it was never contradicted. So we put that officer's name in our lawsuit. 2 other things that happened that I think are significant, and this is where people do not want the truth to come out. The police, the city has filed what they call a gag order against us, seeking to prevent us from making public statements. Now, they have not filed that in court. I think it was a political ploy on their part for us not to make any more public statements, but that has not worked. You can't stop us from making public statements unless there's a court order that says that. A court order could be granted against the lawyers, but will not be granted against the sisters or any family members, because the most important thing you can do during a situation like this is protest. Protesting is extraordinarily important because, as John Lewis said, you got to make them uncomfortable. That's the thing he said to me once years ago. You got to make them uncomfortable. His term that we now know about is good trouble. But I remember him telling me years ago, you got to make them uncomfortable. And you make people uncomfortable by protesting. Because if you're protesting, that means, and they're not responding to you, that means they're uncomfortable with what you're doing. And they want to stop you from doing it. So the city filed claims that they're going to do this petition to put a gag order on us. That may or may not work. But the second thing they want to do is move the case with a change of venue to someplace away out of the county that it's in. Well, they clearly do not understand where they are. And I'll be honest about that, because the case itself is in Sacramento. Sacramento is not in Vallejo. The jury pool that will be selected is as far south, of course, as Vallejo, but all the way to the Oregon border and even out to other people's territory out in Stockton and places like that. And so I've been up there with a number of cases, and I know that the cross-section of the people is so diverse, and the people are not Bay Area type people for the most part. It's not even a good venue, frankly, but it's the one that we're in. I mean, I'd rather not be there. I'd rather be in San Francisco, of course, or San Jose, but I have to be in Sacramento. The good fortune would be that the case got transferred down to San Jose. That would be terrific if that would happen, but that's not going to happen. So this is the city's efforts to squash it, to stop the protesting that's taking place. And I think that what the sisters have done and other community people have made the city uncomfortable. The press conference we had at the time we filed the lawsuit made everybody uncomfortable because we were speaking the truth. Right. We were speaking the truth about what happened. There's no way they're going to be able to justify killing Sean in the manner in which they did. He was not even given a warning. He wasn't even told, stop, surrender. Nothing. Yeah. So what you have an obligation to do, which they didn't do. So now that's just a portion of this case. The second component of this case is that what we call pattern and practice. The department has had a history of killing people, as mentioned earlier, over 30 people since in the early 90s, but certainly a lot more in the last 10 to 15 years. None of these officers have been punished. They haven't been terminated. A couple have quit, but the department itself has ratified all of that misconduct by failing to take appropriate action. It is only recently in another case that I'm in where they shot, you may know this, the Ronnell Foster case, where that officer just got terminated, but he didn't get terminated for what he did in the Ronnell Foster case, or did he get what he did in the Willie McCoy case? So the problem on it is Vallejo as a department has a lot of problems. And excuse me, and cases sometimes can be used to address themselves to that problem. Beyond the circumstances of Sean's case, it may be that we might be able to do a lot of good work here because there are other things that are taking place for all of you to know. An unusual case that has happened. We talked about the window that's in the car. That window that was used, that the officer shot through, we wanted to have that to examine. I made a request to preserve all evidence, including the windshield as well as the car, so that I can go back and reconstruct to see what the officer saw from the position that he was in and where was Sean. Well, unbeknownst to us, they destroyed it. The evidence was destroyed by a lieutenant who was the head of the police union. So the police union gets involved, destroys the evidence that we want, and thinks, well, who cares? It wasn't a big deal. Well, what has happened is that the Attorney General has come in to investigate that component. This is rare. The Attorney General is coming in to determine whether or not evidence was destroyed. To me, that's a criminal violation, and the officer should be prosecuted for that conduct. The other thing that's going on, that's part of this case, as the officers in Vallejo, from what we've been told, have a history and practice that when they kill someone, that officer will bend his star for a period of time. And that is kind of let everybody know, yeah, I did it. We did it. Ha, 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 we got away with it. Well, that's another matter that's under investigation. Now, the case is still unusual in that Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, has said that there should be an investigation by the FBI into the issue of property being destroyed. Well, that is an important concept. That means the case is larger and it's being seen by more people than is customary. Now, that largely I think is a function of the sisters here, as well as other community people that really bringing attention to it, because it's not common for the Speaker of the House to get involved in a local shooting that's not even in her jurisdiction, you know? So, but the case is important because it smacks of being illegal in terms of the conduct that took place. And so the other aspect of the case that we have worked and thought that could happen, that the officer should be prosecuted criminally for federal violations or state criminal statutes. That has not happened. We made a request of the city attorney, the local district attorney, to conduct an investigation or to recuse herself and let the AG do it. She then volunteered to have the AG, the Attorney General, do the investigation for criminal prosecution. And he said, no. He said, no, I'm not going to do it. And so now we don't know what's going to happen in terms of criminal prosecution, whether or not there's anybody even conducting an investigation. But something has to be done. You can't just have this kind of shooting and no one gets investigated for it and no one is held accountable. That's not to say they will, but it's important for us to keep the pressure on for that to occur. So where the case is now, we're presently in federal district court. I think that we're waiting to get what they call a case management conference. But I can just tell you, the process once you go into court is a slow one. You may know this. You know, it takes time. It's not something that can be done within a year or two, sometimes 2 or 3 years. And that Sacramento is a slow court. But we are determined not to let them get away with this, period. So that's where we are right now.
Well, thank you, Mr. Burris, and to Ashley and Michelle. I know that this is going to be a long fight and that we need everyone to remain involved, to stay active. You mentioned something a little bit earlier, Mr. Burris, about good trouble, like Mr. John, Representative John Lewis had mentioned. And I know this weekend on October 2nd, following the leadership of the sisters with Justice League California and other members, we stirred up some good trouble this weekend in Sacramento. And I wanted to also introduce Mona and Chandra, who's also on this call with us, who spent some time over the weekend bringing forth the 3 demands that we have been calling for with Sean. And I'm going to pass it to Ashley and Michelle real quick just to tell us what those 3 demands were. And then I wanted to invite Chandra, Ashley, first Ashley, Michelle, and Chandra and Mona to tell us about what took place over the weekend and what were we trying to get across through the demonstration that took place.
On Friday, thank you, Jasmine. Well, on Friday, October 2nd marked the 4-month anniversary of our brother since he has been murdered. As John said, there has been no criminal prosecution, no investigation in our brother's case. And this is such a high profile case too now because the Vallejo Police Union, the president is the one who ordered the destruction of evidence. That one thing is already clearly obstruction of justice. So there's too much wiggle room for this to be swept under the rug, just like Vallejo has done for so many years. So
and it's just a prime example that police can no longer police themselves.
And so we took the action upon our hands, and with the leadership of us and like Mona and Chandra, alongside 17 other, with us, there were a total of 17 peaceful protesters. We took the initiative of, leading up to this event. We have continuously reached out to the AG's office, to the governor's office, sending emails, sending videos, doing everything we could to get the attention we needed. So on the 4-month marker, we took it upon ourselves to go to the governor's home to get a statement from him with our 3 demands. Our 3 demands were 1, to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate my brother's case and the corrupt and violent policing practices of the Vallejo Police Department.
To fire, arrest, and charge Officer Jarrett Ton And our third and last demand is for there to be a formal investigation for every police officer involved in the destruction of evidence.
So we pulled up to the governor's house just with these three simple demands, asking for a statement. We want to sit down and we want to have a conversation on our brother's murder. There's been here in California a lot of performative activism from a lot of leadership, people who hold office and are supposed to be our leaders. So we went simply to this house just wanting to have a conversation and wanting a statement from his behalf. We were out there with Chandra and Mona, Jasmine, you as well, and many more to Gathering for Justice members. And we stood out there and we were there for
maybe two
hours waiting to get a statement, chanting.
We kept saying we were nonviolent, peaceful, and we weren't leaving until we got a statement from Governor Gavin Newsom, while we were seeing the Secret Service and CHP work closely together, try to strategize on how they can have us exit the premises.
And as impacted families, we can be easily at home mourning, crying, and
on the four-month
anniversary of our brother. But we put our bodies on the line alongside 15 other peaceful protesters to get the acknowledgement, to get the statement from the governor. And the governor welcomed us to his home with 25 plus police vehicles.
There was like 80 officers.
And there was almost about 60 to 80 officers there in squad gear. They came at us and told us, if you guys fail to leave, we're going to have to arrest you.
And we all willingly risked arrest.
Because at this point, we know we want a statement from the governor. So the governor, he had us arrested. So we were arrested for over 20 hours on Friday, alongside Mona, Chandra, and Jasmine. We were booked in Sacramento County Jail for 20 to 23 hours. And I am so thankful for these women and men who put their bodies on the line, demanding justice for our brother, but also demanding justice for California. Like I said, there's a lot of performative activism and lack of leadership on the governor's end.
Where he wants to talk about Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, but we can't forget about the names that have happened in our own state, in his own backyard.
And yes, it is still justice for George Floyd and justice for Breonna Taylor, but we need Governor Gavin Newsom to stand in the front lines with us, see the change, have the impacted families have a seat at the table, and work with us in ways that we will never get our brother Sean back. But what can we do to implement change here in California so these officers don't continuously get bounced around and continuously have that license to kill without any accountability? And that's all we asked for. And we were in Sacramento County Jail under some really horrific conditions. There were no COVID protocols in there. The officers made a mockery out of all of us being in there. We saw that people who went, there was 2 protesters that day in Sacramento. We saw that the group that went protesting for animal rights were treated a lot differently versus us 17 peaceful protesters demanding justice for Black and brown.
Those that were protesting for animal rights at the state capitol climbed the state capitol to the 2nd floor, chained themselves, and put a banner, and they got released with no bail.
And for us, just asking for a simple statement, we had 5 misdemeanor charges put on us
that we still have
right now. And for you guys tuning in and listening, we want you guys to just join us and start calling the governor's office, calling who you can,
tweet, comment,
tell them to drop the charges because this is ridiculous. Our governor has said he supports peaceful protesting as we were practicing. And here we are alongside 17 other peaceful protesters dealing with these unfair charges.
And so far, Michelle and I and the 15 other folks that risked arrest have gotten more repercussions than the officers that have murdered my brother and destroyed evidence.
So it's a long fight, but I want to pass it over.
Yeah, I know, Mona, I know you're from Vallejo. I know that you talked a little bit about how you're from the city and that just a few blocks away, Sean was killed, and you stood with us because you knew the importance of actually not remaining silent. What was it like putting your body and your life on the line to stand in solidarity with the sisters? And why is it important for folks to also stand in solidarity with this family? She may be mute, but Chandra, go ahead. You're also you have relatives and folks from Vallejo. Do you want to share a little bit about yourself and what you hope to have accomplished with folks there that night?
Sure. So I stood in solidarity with the sisters because I definitely understand the corrupt police environment of the city of Vallejo. I used to live out there actually, so I'm quite familiar with it. When I first heard about the case, I knew how wrong it was, and I just knew I had to stand up and say something about it. I couldn't be silent about it. Standing on the line, this was my first time ever, I guess, risking being arrested. I've never been arrested before, so that was definitely something new to me. It was a scary experience, but it was an experience I definitely learned from. One, I kind of feel like our voices were heard in a sense. I feel like we still have a long way to go, though.
Mona, are you back yet? Do you want to share a few words?
Yes. Can you hear me?
You can. Yes, there you go.
Yeah, I relocated to the Bay Area more than 5 years ago, and I do live just a few miles away from where Sean passed away, where he was killed. That little detail was the thing that really pushed me to commit myself to this cause and commit myself to helping his family. Prior to that, I really wanted to be a part of grassroots law project, and I started getting involved with that, and that is how I learned about Sean. I felt so horrible learning that he was only 22 years old, and that this really just happened a few miles away from my house. I couldn't believe that all of the things that you might expect, like the officer being charged and fired and anything like that hadn't happened yet. And even months later, that less and less action on the part of Vallejo PD was being done. I mean, to the point where just hearing about the evidence being destroyed, that was really scary. And just knowing that made me want to support their cause. And I just think that for us to have to go down to the governor's home and plead with them, I thought that might get his attention. I thought there's no way that he would allow the family of Sean to be arrested. There's no way that he would, ever put them in that position, and it happened, and he allowed it. And even after he was asked, to make a statement about it, he still refused to even say Sean's name. He still refused to address that directly, and just very indirectly spoke about what other things that he was trying to change within the justice system in California. And yes, that is important, but it just really goes to show that he doesn't have the victims' families, their rights and their justice in his interests. And that's not something that's right. And I think that that's more than enough reason for people here locally and across the country to be supportive of these girls.
Yeah, well, I thank you all. We're going to be coming back to you all. I know that, Governor Newsom said in one of his statements that he's committed to the broader cause of justice. And so I think that, we'll still continue to wait for that, wait for him to acknowledge what is happening and to appoint a special prosecutor and to investigate the destruction of evidence and ensure that that process is actually going forward. Mr. Harry Belafonte said the reason to get arrested is to stop the machine. And, you all were a part of, getting wheels rolling, getting things moving. We talked a lot about reform, and I'm excited to talk to the next two speakers. But we'll be coming back to you all at the end to remind us about how do we take action right now, and how can folks support the case, Mr. Burris, in ways to help uplift Sean's case across the country and really across the state. But I thank you all for joining us today, and please stay on a little bit later where we'll bring you back in. I'm going to be introducing Dennis and Lewis, who is both actively involved. Dennis, I'm going to begin off with you. I'm so grateful to have you join us today. You currently are with the ACLU, and the ACLU, among with many other civil rights organizations, have really been at the cornerstone of policy and legislative change through legal advocacy. And also a part of your role, most currently, you've been a part of a specific bill around the assembly and state around decertification and SB 731. And so, Dennis, you are a legislative advocate with the ACLU in Sacramento. You've been working on statewide policies around criminal justice, mental health issues. And prior to joining the ACLU, you were appointed by the former governor, Jerry Brown, as the Deputy Director of Legislation at the California Department of Consumer Affairs. You've been very active in this work, very familiar with how policies and legislation really impact what is happening on a local level. And then we have Lewis, who's also here, who is a recent college graduate candidate, also running for the next Vallejo City Council member in District 3, was born in Stockton, represent, I'm just kidding, and graduated from American Canyon High School in Vallejo, where he earned a scholarship to play football at the Mid-America Nazarene University in Kansas, where he also earned his BA in communications with a minor in psychology. Lewis, at a young age, always knew that he wanted to be active in impacting lives of young people and getting involved in the community. Lewis is also, he has also been working as a youth as a referee, coach, educator, and behavioral therapist, going to outreach trips to places like Haiti, Dominican Republic, and being a youth group leader for his church, and continues to be a strong servant leader in his community for young people, and also is a part of a group called Vessels of Vallejo. I want to start off with you, Dennis, again. We've been talking earlier in the conversation around the impacts of misconduct and what it means for officers who are not being held accountable and being transferred from department to department, and getting away with things, not being protected, not protecting our community with officers around this. Can you tell us a little bit about your advocacy work and the bill around decertification, and how does this relate to Sean's case?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jasmine. Appreciate you all having me. Dennis Cuevas Romero with the ACLU of California. First off, to the Monte Rosa sisters, just want to applaud you for your strength and your continued advocacy even during this tough time. ACLU is one of several co-sponsor organizations that ran Senate Bill 731, the police decertification bill authored by Senator Bradford out of the Los Angeles area, out of Gardena. The bill essentially was an effort to create a statewide decertification process, essentially a mechanism to revoke the license, so to speak, of a police officer, to ensure that if they commit certain misconduct, they could not be an officer in the state of California. California, unfortunately, is one of 5 states in the country that does not have a statewide decertification process. And what that means is that an officer, like Officer Tong, can shoot someone in one city in California, get fired or resign, and then end up applying for another job in another law enforcement agency in the state of California, get rehired and do it again. And as we've heard on this call, the murderer Tong has already shot other folks previously without any repercussion, right? So SB 731, the goal of that bill was to hopefully stop future instances of Officer Tong and hopefully prevent other families from having to be in the same circumstances that Ashley and Michelle have to deal with, where instead of grieving, they're fighting for activism. We wanted to try to prevent, unnecessary killings from, officers that continue to, shoot people and straight out murder Black and brown folks. So that's what we did. Co-sponsors, ACLU is just one of many. The Black Lives Matter California, the Youth Justice Coalition, the Stop Coalition, California Communities United for Restorative Youth Justice, California Families for United for Justice, the Alliance of Boys and Men of Color, and Policy Link. All of those groups help try to propel SB 731 and try to make it law. One of the common themes that you keep hearing on this call was, the lack of leadership. And that's what happened this legislative session. There was just a fundamental lack of leadership and a lot of performative activism, where in the wake of George Floyd, we had, at least 50 legislators, statewide assembly members and senators that went outside on the Capitol and took a knee for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And many of those, at least a handful of those, when it came time to take actually some action, some significant action, some action that matters, they were nowhere to be found. They were not willing to support SB 731. And that is just a sad reality, but they got away with it this time. We're gonna make sure, in the next legislative session that we put the pressure on them and that we hold them accountable and that we try to pass this statewide legislation to hopefully prevent future incidents like this.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm going to come right back to you. Louis, I know that you have been extremely active in Vallejo and also have been supporting the family with also bringing awareness to Sean's case. There's now 2 billboards in Vallejo. Share with us a little bit about where those are located, and tell us about what is Vessels of Vallejo doing right now to support impacted families, and how have you been a part of lifting up the case of Sean, and what are things you want to see changed in your communities? You mentioned also on another conversation that we had around a contract being up with the police association in Vallejo. Tell us about why this is a critical moment for folks to pay attention to what is happening in our communities, and specifically around Sean's case.
Yeah, thank you, Jasmine, and thank you everyone for tuning in. My name is Louis Michael. I am a Vallejo resident, been here for about 8 years. I'm running for Vallejo City Council, and I also founded an organization called Vessels of Vallejo. So right now, currently, Vessels of Vallejo was able to fundraise enough funds for 2 billboards to go up, calling for justice for Sean Monterosa. We have one on Virginia Street and Sonoma, and the other is on Main Street and Calusa in Vallejo. And that one is like overseeing the parking lot of Vallejo Police Department. So we organized an action around that and went out and kind of unveiled that billboard, and it was really amazing. I do want to follow Dennis's lead in commending Ashley and Michelle. I have the utmost respect for the Monterosa sisters. I understand that this work is not easy. It is very draining. It takes an emotional toll on your body. And I don't know what it's like firsthand to lose somebody to police brutality, but just doing this work is a lot. And just all of the actions that I've organized and that I've seen Ashley and Michelle at, and hearing them, relive this story over and over again, I know that it's difficult, and I really commend the sisters for that. It's enough to go through it the first time, but that story it always, hits hard for me, and it has to be told. We have to get the word out there, and we have to do this work, but it's not easy. Vessels of Vallejo is a community organization. We are a grassroots org that just organizes around, educating and empowering the community to take an active role in various city processes, with the specific lens on restorative justice, specifically in the Black and Brown community. We've done everything from, protests. Obviously, we've got involved. We have a pretty good following on social media, so people who are involved can figure out what it looks like to post public comments on city council meetings, and to get involved in signing petitions that we've started to, hold certain people within City Hall accountable, and people who have had a history of, irresponsibility or corruption within City Hall. we started something called the People's Budget a couple months ago, where the budget for Vallejo was getting ready to be passed, and they were getting ready to give $4.2 million more to the Vallejo Police Department, and they are already receiving 46% of the police budget or of the general fund in Vallejo. And so we were organizing around putting out a survey where we could ask the community members, what does it look like? What are your priorities for the city? Where do you want to see the money go? And the results found that, we didn't want the money going towards the police, at least not 46% of it. And so 1,400 people filled out that survey, and we presented that to City Hall, and we had, we pushed for people to pay attention to that, and we were ignored. And they ended up passing the budget that they set forth. We were able to get them to postpone it, I think like 2 or 3 times, which was amazing. And we sort of made history in Vallejo. You've never seen that happen. So it showed that we were, getting people's attention. We were ruffling some feathers, getting in good trouble. But they still show that they don't listen. They don't care what the people of Vallejo want. They don't care what the people who have been impacted by Vallejo Police Department they care about. They just ignore us time and time again. And so, yeah, that's some of the work Vessels does. We've done protests at Vallejo Police Department. We've done protests at City Hall. We've gone to the council members' homes and protested. And it's been amazing seeing the community come together and feel like they're having their voices heard, and seeing, a little bit of change. We're seeing people are starting to pay attention a little bit. And living in Vallejo is interesting because there's about 120,000 residents, and people don't know what's going on in their own city. It's considered a bedroom city. People go out to San Francisco and Oakland and Emeryville, even Napa and Fairfield to go work, and then they come home, go to sleep, and then go back to work. So they don't really know what's going on in their own communities. And so I, as a city council candidate, I'm going, around the neighborhood talking to residents, and I'm bringing up, asking them what their concerns are. And a lot of them don't know a lot of what's going on around, City Hall and the Vallejo Police Department and all of the corruption. And so that's what Vessels of Vallejo really strives to do, is kind of bring attention to what is very obvious, and it's very in your face, but only if you're the few people in Vallejo that actually are paying attention to those things. If you're not paying attention, it's easy to just live here and not know that you're being affected by the things going on. So yeah, I chose to run for city council. Getting involved in this work really inspired me. I would, organizing with the Monterosa sisters played a huge role. Like, I would hear them say, we need young people to get involved in local politics. We need people like you who are out here protesting to go run for council, go run for, school board, get involved in a way that can really bring change. And so a lot of that played a role in me making the decision. Of course, there were some other factors, but that's been pretty much my journey. And what's important about right now is VPOA's contract will be up for negotiation. VPOA is the Vallejo Police Officers Association. That's the police union in Vallejo for Vallejo Police Department, and they have way too much power. It's scary how much power they have within the police department, within City Hall, and that contract gives them the power to do what they're doing. And so being a city council member, being elected in November would mean that I would have a say in voting on the next contract that is written up for VPOA. And if we can get a majority to not pass whatever contract is in the works or whatever they're planning to do, and we can have a say in what it looks like, that would be amazing. So that's part of the reason why I'm running, specifically this election. If I don't win this election, I'll try again in 2 years. And I think that I'm very new to this realm of politics. I've always been involved in the community, but politics was something I never think I'd do. But doing this work kind of showed me, like, you have to get involved in those ways. So yeah.
Well, thank you, Louis. We appreciate all the work that you've been doing and putting forth to honor and also to bring empower community members to understand what happened to Sean's life through visual activism and through the work that you all been doing. Baynard Bruston, who's someone I admire in this civil rights movement, said that we need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers. And I think that that's what you all are doing with Vessels of Vallejo, steering up good trouble and being these angelic troublemakers, as everyone else here on this call has been. Dennis, I'm going to go back to you real quick. I wanted to ask you, now that SB 731 didn't go anywhere, what are our conversations around We Keep Us Safe? What does that mean to you? How do we keep communities safe, and how can legislators and folks right now take action to maybe bring forth either new legislation or to push local elected officials? Are there local policies that are currently in place that we should be paying attention to, or legislation that folks should be getting involved in that can support families like Ashley and Michelle and the Monterosa family? What are some of the things that you're kind of involved in right now?
Yeah, so a couple of different things. I think because of all the fantastic work that folks are doing on the ground, impacted family, grassroots organizations, that they are lifting up this message that we need a reimagining of what public safety looks like. We need to, defund the police, divest from the police, and reinvest in the community. I think a lot of that is just it is just sprouting from the roots. I think there's going to be a lot of efforts to really impact that movement. A couple different things. I mean, there was a bill in Sacramento, a statewide legislation to try to create a pilot project to reimagine emergency response. Because as we know, when folks call 911, if they even do, because I know a lot of communities of color are afraid to call 911 because of the implications of what a 911 call would do. We tried to run a bill that would create a pilot program for community-based organizations to get funding to be the alternatives to police. So communities, we take care of us, that we would take care, the community members would take care of us. Unfortunately, Governor Brown vetoed that on September 30th. But that doesn't mean that it stops. That is just the beginning of the conversation where we are going to push members in Sacramento related to statewide legislation to get away from the status quo, because the status quo isn't working. It's not protecting brown and Black communities. It's killing us. And we needed to reimagine what we see is protection of our communities, because it doesn't work. On the local level, I would just encourage folks to continue, find the grassroots organizations that are doing the work in your local communities and try to support their efforts. One of the things that we try to do, and we're going to continue trying to do, is to center the voices of impacted families. And that, I think, is critical not only in your local efforts, but statewide legislation, because these are the folks that know what's best for them and their communities. And that's something that I would encourage folks to do, that whether you can do that at your local level or you could do that statewide. In terms of kind of the statewide agenda, the state legislature comes back in January formally, and we are going to be in the process in community with our coalition members to think about what our legislative package is for next year. Because like I mentioned, the SB 731 and the Crisis Act, the bill that I talked about, community alternatives for emergency response, AB 2054, that's just the beginning. Just because we lost this year doesn't mean that we're going to lose next year. We're going to come back stronger, harder, put more pressure on law enforcement, on elected officials to stop being performative and really take action. So I think there's many things that you can do, but I would really encourage folks to get involved, follow the leads of Ashley and Michelle and other impacted family members, because they are doing the work. And we want to make sure that we support impacted family members as much as we can.
Thank you, Dennis, for that. And thank you for reminding us of that, because it's true, is that those who are closest to the issues are closest to the solutions, and that we must follow the leadership of Ashley and Michelle. And that's what we have been doing, that when they speak, we know that we're coming with them. We're coming right behind them, following their leadership. And we're just grateful to also have them, serving with us and leading after them. I'm going to bring everyone back as we begin to wrap up this conversation. We thank you both for just sharing with us a little bit about what is happening and what we can do in this moment. And right now, I'm calling each and every one of us to talk about just what can we do right now to take action. I'm going to, we'll start and end with you, Ashley and Michelle. But for those who are on the other line, just quickly, just give us one thing. And maybe Mr. Burris, you may have a few. We'll let you slide. But for everyone else, what is one thing that folks can do to take action for Michelle and Ashley, or your commitments to this movement right now to lift up justice for Sean? And let's just start off with we'll start off with Lewis, and then we'll make our way back around to the rest of the group.
Hey, Lewis, I think she called you up.
Maybe he can't hear me. We'll move on to Chandra when you're ready.
Okay. So one thing I think people should do definitely is contact the governor, flood him with emails, calls.
I have really poor connection.
It's all good, Lewis. We'll come back to you. No worries. Thank you. Sorry, Chandra, go ahead and.
No worries. Flood him with emails, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, calls. If you're able to go up to the offices, call media outlets as well to try to get them to cover this story more, because I feel like we have to do more, because Governor Newsom is aware. He heard Sean's name. We heard it in a press conference yesterday, and we've seen his response. So we have to stay on him to get something done.
Thank you, Chandra, and thank you for being with us in that cell. We thank you for standing with the sisters in Justice League California. We'll continue to keep folks involved, and we thank you for your leadership. I'm going to pass it to Dennis.
Yeah, I would just say to keep tagging and putting pressure on the governor on social media, asking him to take action. I think that's, he is responsive to social media pressure. So keep doing that. Keep lifting up the ask from Ashley and Michelle to seek justice for Sean. The other thing I'll mention is that, in your local communities, put some pressure on your local elected officials, your assembly members and your senators. Tell them to commit to support significant police reform next legislative session, because we need real action, not performative action.
That's right. Yes. Mona? You're on mute. Sorry. There you go.
Sorry, I'm always muting myself. Sorry. I would say amplify the voices of people who are very active, or who are have more time than you have to devote to a cause, or to hone in on something that you really care about. I know myself, I have like one or two people that if I post something that, has anything to do with my work or my writing, or a cause that I'm, trying to find justice for, I have two people that I can count on that I know are going to be reposting it. But, if there were more people, just be that person. Be the person that you can be counted on to amplify those voices, that, if people are saying something that you believe in, that you care about, be that person that speaks out to, your network of people.
Thank you, Mona. And Lewis, we'll come back to you.
Yeah, so sorry about that, but I would say vote, of course, as the politician. Voting is important at your local level, at the national level. just vote and do the census. There was an extension granted on the census, so that's really important in figuring out what people specifically in Black and Brown communities need, and how we can allocate resources and funds towards low-income families and things of that nature. So doing the census and voting would be what I would say for taking action.
Yes, thank you. And Mr. Burris, what can we do? How do we support you? How do we help get Sean's name out there? And I think you're on mute as well. You're on mute, Mr. Burris. Sorry.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, so, one of the more important aspect of the litigation aspect of it, particularly with families, is to have support in the courtrooms. It's very important for the community to come and support, because when a judge or jury looks out there, they need to know that people care, that folks care about this person and they care about what happened. So when the time comes, it'll be very important to have community support in the courtroom. That matters more than you can imagine. I mean, that's number one. Number two, I also think that protesting, first off, social media should be employed against the AG's office as well as the local district attorney's office. Basically letting them know that the whole country cares about whether they're going to do their job and prosecute this officer in this case. That's extraordinarily important, because there are facts here that would support a prosecution, but you got to make the local DA know that you're watching this, and that just because they said no initially doesn't mean they get to continually say no. The pressure should be placed on them. That includes social media, that includes protesting in the courtyard in front of the DA's office, or protesting in front of the AG's office, wherever it may be. But those are public people that need to know that people care about what they have to do. The next component, of course, and this really goes to the question of reform. And each department, certainly in Vallejo, has issues. They have issues that we're working on in terms of the ratification of bad misconduct, the point that's just been made by Lewis on the new contract. I think that's a missed opportunity, because the best way to control police unions is to have control over their budget and participate when they're trying to renegotiate that budget, because there are things that can be done. And we are at a point now, I think it's been mentioned by others, that you really want to, quote, reimagine what the department and law enforcement should look like. It doesn't mean you don't have any money for the police. That's not at all. But there are areas where the police are enforcing and that should not be involved with the police. When you're talking about I think you mentioned first responders, that whole question about who responds to the mentally impaired, who responds to homeless, who applied maybe even to traffic tickets. There should not be people with guns supporting and being involved with that. That's money that should be taken out of the police budget and given to social services in some way to deal with. And so that's reimagining what the police law enforcement should look like. That should occur. And of course, in every department, they have these issues that reform can take place. And some of these are being done at the legislative level. That's good. But some of those things that are being done there can also be taken back to local agencies. I will say this, you have to have committees to get stuff done. You protest, and you've seen the articles written about me that I've said that you have protesting, but at some point you have to have the plan to move forward, to move the social agenda. And that doesn't require everyone's participation, but it does require people who are willing to spend some time to think about those issues. So I think there's multiple levels that work can be done, but I think that standing up, making trouble, good trouble, getting in the way, are all part of the concepts that are necessary to move the social agenda and to try to minimize the likelihood that more Sean Monterosa cases are going to occur, because that's what you're really talking about. You know, in the city of Oakland, we don't have many police shootings like we used to before I got involved in those cases many years ago. We've had one in 3 or 4 years, and that wasn't even with a black guy or a brown person. So it can be done, but unfortunately, sometimes you need the court to be involved too. You know, you need the law enforcement component where there's a hammer over the department. And that's what we got to get here in Vallejo. There has to be a hammer that if you want to make changes, we've developed those, but somehow they have to know that if you don't make the changes, there's a consequence that you have to pay. And that's what we got in front of you.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Burris. There's definitely a lane for everybody, and we all must do our part in getting involved. Before we get to the sisters, they're going to close us off. Or for anyone else who just we're going to spend 1 or 2 minutes on this. What can we do to keep ourselves safe? What is it that, similar to what, if anyone else wanted to add to some of the reimagination part, what can we do to keep our community safe without law enforcement or during this moment? If anyone wants to jump in. I know we heard a little bit about it. Wanted to give an opportunity for anyone else to share before we end and close with our sisters.
I like this thing. It's important to let people know that when we're talking about the police or police reform, a lot of people get scared when they hear those words because they think that we're saying, okay, let's get rid of the police department tomorrow. Let's take all their money away. Let's take their badges and their guns and we'll be all right. And that's not the case. We have to let people know that this is a gradual process of reallocating funds to other services, other programs to better support our community. When we look at Vallejo, when we look at our youth programs and our schools, they're getting cuts left and right. 2 schools just closed down this year in Vallejo, yet they're giving $4.2 million more to the police. The kids that are growing up here are being over-policed and terrorized by the police department. And if they don't have anywhere to go, they don't have any resources, they don't have after-school programs, whatever they need to, stay focused, to stay out of the streets or whatever, they're gonna end up, coming in contact with law enforcement. And so if we can find ways to support our youth and give them, the resources they need, then that's what we mean by defunding the police. So I don't imagine, this taking like 5 years, 10 years. I'm more so thinking like 20, 30 years of just this gradual process. And, if we're being responsible with our city's budget, we can achieve real change.
Thank you. Ashley and Michelle, I want to end with you all. What are ways that we can take action? And what are things that you want folks to know that maybe you didn't get to say earlier, if there's anything, and tell us how we can support you all.
Well, first off, I just want to say thank you to everyone who joined this panel, and you guys shared how you feel for police reform, but also with my brother's case and just standing in solidarity with my sister and I and our family. Most importantly, right now, since we caused some good trouble this past weekend alongside our 15 other peaceful protesters, whoever's out there, please continue to flood comments, give the governor and let him know that he needs to drop these charges, because at the end of the day, how is it that 2 impacted sisters and 15 other peaceful protesters are dealing with more repercussions than the officer Jared Ton who struck the bullet and murdered my brother? That is not right. That is not okay. As Dennis said, that's a lot of performative activism on the governor's end. And if we need to go to the AG's office to also protest again, we will. If we need to go to the DA, even though she recused herself, we will go over there too. Whatever we need to do. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
And this was not a loss. It was a lesson, and it just motivated us even more to go 100 times harder. Again, just continue to comment on Gavin's platforms, AG Becerra's, because we expect them to still appoint a special prosecutor. We expect him to fire, arrest, and charge Decertification. We expect him to have a formal investigation on every officer that has any involvement on destroying the evidence. And whether we will go to his house again, or we'll do a hunger strike, or we'll do whatever, but we're not going to stop organizing. And, you know, there's probably people right now watching this on behalf of the governor's team. So hi, let your governor know to get these demands met, because again, we're not going to stop, and we'll continue to re-strategize and organize, because it's a marathon and it's not a moment, it's a movement. So,
but also you're on the right side of history or you're not. And this is also a thing where we could have had these conversations about defunding. Maybe 2 years ago, a lot of people would make a mockery and laugh at us. But, you know, as an impacted sister, as an impacted family member, impacted families deserve a seat at the table to push for these changes, make sure that we don't have officers having this license to kill and murdering our brothers and sisters anymore. Unfortunately, if SB 731 would have been implemented and passed long time ago, my brother would still be here, and many other people would as well, you know. So that's just like Dennis said, lack of leadership at the end of the day. And you're, like I said, you're either on the right side of history or you're not. And, you know, just be with us, support us. If you guys can't be on the grounds with us, do it remotely.
Sign the petition, share with your community Sean's story and what we're trying to get done. Donate if you can, and just help out however way you can, you know. But the more attention we need, is the more attention, it's a lot better.
But also, don't wait until it's one of your old loved ones to join this fight for justice. Because, you know, our family, luckily we're born and raised in San Francisco. We've been to protests since we were little. We've had radical teachers bring awareness like this.
I was a youth ambassador in South America. I went to go protest against the School of the Americas. And so this is nothing new, but it's definitely different when it hits you personally. But just join this fight while you can, and, you know, fight for your loved ones while you're still here. And, you know, we want to mourn the dead, but we also want to fight for the living.
And also just make sure you guys love each other at home, check in on your families, because no day is ever promised. And just like my brother's last text message to us, he went out infuriated with what happened to George Floyd, and just 40 minutes afterwards, an officer, Decertification, struck the bullet and murdered my brother. And that message is so powerful.
It's a message for Black and Brown unity. It's a message that, you know, this needs to end now.
But also it's a torch that he gave to my sister and I, and he's like, here it is, run with it and do something about it. And this is what we're doing. And I will do anything in my power to make sure California has a change, and we, you know, no other family deals with this pain, but also we can't have Vallejo Police Department being the third highest per capita here in California to go away and sweeping these murders under the rug. San Bernardino County is the first here in California, and so many more. So we, like Louis said, we need to reallocate funds, divest and put it into our communities so we can serve, so the children can grow up and fight for this change.
Youth in Vallejo are only counting the days until they're the next hashtag, you know, until they're the next lawsuit, and it's not right. So let's do this while we can, and let's fight for everyone that's still here, that still has a chance to be saved.
But to end this on a good note, everyone, tell the governor to drop our charges, because these charges are laughable at the end of the day.
Very comical.
But at the end of the day, we posed no threat. We were civil. We did cause some good trouble. But at the end of the day, as thank you to Melanie Woodrow, who was a reporter from ABC7, to ask the governor the question of why he arrested the sisters.
During the COVID briefing, but she ended up talking about COVID, because COVID is a virus that circulates our communities all the time.
So thank you to everyone, and thank you to all on this panel, to the 3 women who went down in county jail with us. I love you forever. And for you 3, Dennis, Louis, and of course, John, like, we're part of this bigger family in this change. And, you know, California is no different from what's happening in Louisville. And it's time that, you know, a lot of the performative activism, and, you know, it's the same bird, 2 different parties, but we need to hold them all accountable.
Absolutely.
So, thank you.
Good work. Good work. Thank you.
You all are amazing, and I think you all just killed the ending, and I don't have much.
I was getting hyped. I'm like, I'm a Bay native. I was like, but you know what I mean? You know, this is what happens when it hits so close to home. You want to ride for your loved ones, and you're going to do everything you can for your loved ones. And that's what we want to do at the end of the day. And this was not a setback. It's just a step from a major comeback.
And people can look at it as an L, but it's not an L. It's a good L, and that L turned into lessons. And lessons
turn our L's into blessings.
Yes, that part. But thank you all, and thank you. Just join, follow Justice for Sean _ at on Twitter and Instagram.
Follow Justice League NYC, the Gather for Justice,
ACLU, Louis Michael running for City Council, Chandra and Mona. I'm so happy to have you guys in our corner. And man, county jail is not it, but there's a reason we were in there that long, because we saw how Gavin Newsom focuses on COVID debriefings
but
every
he doesn't
day.
focus on COVID in county jails and prisons.
Yes, that part, because it was not sanitary, it was not safe. So
They
many
barely
problems
gave us
there.
masks.
That's for another conversation, right?
Yeah,
It's a whole other
Yeah, well, we thank everyone else, everyone who's been a part of this panel, and everyone who joined us, especially the sisters of Sean and the family of Sean, Ashley and Michelle, who are also Justice League members and leading us in this fight. We thank you for your leadership. We thank you for always telling your brother's story, for always being on the front lines, for always pushing us in ways to speak up, to take action, to know that we must not rest, that everyone has a role, and that we shouldn't wait until it's our own family members, that we must stand in solidarity with one another. We thank you for always guiding us and leading us in your heart. You are both so pure and so beautiful, and you both are continuing to lead us in one of the most humblest ways. And it's such a humbling experience to stand with you all and to be with you all every time we are in space with you. I just want you to know that there's a community around you who loves you, who cares for you, and a community around you who will protect you all by any means necessary, and that everyone who's watching will continue to stand with you all and fight with you. We are thankful for all the incredible organizers who stood with you all at the governor's house and willingly risked arrest. We thank you all for those who are in here, who are speaking and really fighting and pushing and creating good trouble in your communities. We thank you for everyone who's watching them. And we want you all to continue to stay involved. We are, again, like we said, Justice League California is fighting with Ashley and Michelle and taking after their leadership in this movement and their strategy to move forward. So to stay involved, feel free to follow us at NY Justice League, and then also to follow us at Gather #4 Justice on Twitter and Instagram. And please make sure to stay in touch with us. We've got some also wonderful programming coming up in the next few weeks. Our Voice, Our Power Town Hall on October 21st. Taking place here on our social media account, talking with young people around the importance of voting, the power of voting, and how do we show up for Black and brown bodies in our communities, and how do we show up to the polls doing that. We'll be having a Radical Reads event featuring Sanctuary by Paula Mendoza and Abby Shear, and a new Revolutionary Reels virtual film screening that will be coming out in the following month. To keep up to date on our work, you can text Police Free Schools to number 97779. Again, to keep up with our work, you can text Police Free Schools to number 97779. And finally, to continue to support our work by making it an investment and supporting the bail and defense fund of many of the folks who were out there, you can also do so by supporting on Cash App at Gathering for Justice, or by texting The Gathering to number 44321. And for that, brothers and sisters, we thank you so much for joining us today. Remember to vote, to fill out the census, to fill out the petition, and to demand the governor to take action. And let's not also forget about the Vallejo and Solano County DA, the city attorney's office, unless we continue to put pressure on them, because they also too must prosecute. They also too must investigate, and they also too must take action and responsibility about what is happening in their communities, and as well as doing so across the rest of this country. We appreciate each and every one of you. We hope you all have a blessed day, and we are grateful for everyone who's in here, and we appreciate you all, and we hope you all have a good evening, and you all take care of yourselves. So blessings to everyone. Thank you all so much for joining.
Bye. Thank you guys.